Greetings, fellow collectors and Star Wars fans. Today I would like to share with you my original vintage 1977 Star Wars Destroy Death Star board game. It is by Kenner, and first one to destroy Death Star wins. I think you'll enjoy this. This is a fun, fast-paced game, much like X-Wing squadrons attacking and destroying Death Star. I'm glad it's been in my collection since my grandma got it for me in 1977. It's a really nice looking box and a unique size. And here's the back in black and white. You can pause this to read it. The object is be the first player to destroy Death Star by landing on the Death Star exhaust port. I'm going to show you half an hour of actual gameplay and reading the rules, but first I want to show you an overview of how the game is played. So you move one of 4 X-Wing squadrons, which consist of 3 X-Wings on a base. You spin the spinner. There are no dice nor cards. If you land on another X-Wing squadron, you move back 1 space. After you move, once per turn, you rotate Death Star 1 space. If you end your movement by exact count on a TIE fighter, you have to have a dogfight. You do that by spinning the spinner, and you either shoot down the TIE fighter. If you do, you get a free spin. There are certain positive and negative events on the board. It may make you go back 2 spaces, move ahead 3 spaces, or special instances like returning to Rebel base, skipping a turn, or regaining 1 X-Wing that you might have lost. If you end your turn next to a TIE fighter in the inner Death Star orbit, or the board is rotated and a TIE fighter appears next to your X-Wing squadron, you have a dogfight. Unless Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon are present. That does not affect the 2 TIE fighters in the outer orbit. The Millennium Falcon does cancel Darth Vader. If the Millennium Falcon is not present, then you have to fight the TIE fighters. If you're next to Darth Vader, you have to return to Rebel base, and you neither lose nor gain any X-Wings. So if you need to have a dogfight with a TIE fighter, and you spin, and TIE fighter shoots down one of your X-Wing fighters, then you have the option to remove 1 X-Wing or return to Rebel base and regain any lost X-Wings. You do that by placing them back on the base. You can get to the enter space of the Death Star trench run by landing on these hyperspace drive move to Death Star entry spaces by exact count. There are 3 of those spaces on the game board. On this particular hyperspace drive space, you first have to fight the TIE fighter. If you land by exact count next to the enter space, you can begin your next turn in the Death Star trench. If the enter space is occupied, you can wait till your next turn to move to that space. It's the only time you may skip a turn. If you finish your move by exact count on a TIE fighter, you must have a dogfight. If you win, you get a free spin. Now, as far as having Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon present when you're in the Death Star trench, the rules specifically state that you have to be in the inner orbit. However, you'll see in my full gameplay later, and in a separate video, that I like to house rule games so they're more exciting and in some cases make more sense. In this case, to tie into the movie, I would say that you automatically defeat the TIE fighter if Han Solo is present, and spin again. If you miss the Death Star exhaust port, you continue your movement. It is possible to end your movement on one of the hyperspace drive squares, in which case you can start your next turn on the enter space. If you land on the Death Star exhaust port by exact count, no matter how many X-Wings you have in your squadron, you win the game. I have in fact won the game on the first try. The average is 5 to 10 attempts, no matter how many X-Wing squadrons are in play. So that's how you destroy Death Star. Now I will show you complete gameplay, including reading the rules the first time each situation arises. Let's take a look at the Destroy Death Star game rules. As we said, the object is to be the first player to destroy Death Star by landing on the Death Star exhaust port by exact count. So to set it up, each player selects 3 X-Wings of one color and mounts them on the squadron base. Here's a close-up of an X-Wing on its base. This is how it slides into the base. When it's defeated by a TIE fighter, it's easy enough to take off. Players place their squadrons on the rebel base start position. I'll play this game solo with blue squadron and red squadron. Then line up the enter space on the rotating Death Star with the Death Star start space on the game board. You make sure that these line up to start the game. To start play, all players spin. Highest number on the inner ring of the spinner starts. If the arrow lands on a line at this time or any other time, spin again. We spin to see who goes first. 2 for blue and 5 for red. So red squadron will actually go first. So the first player spins again, moves his squadron the number of spaces shown on the spinner, and rotates Death Star. Squadron is moved along the route to the Death Star orbit as one piece. So you spin the spinner. Red squadron moves 4 spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Each player must rotate Death Star. And you notice they don't say the Death Star, they say Death Star, which is a proper name. 1 space after his turn. These are old school instructions. Today they'd say his or her turn. Rotate Death Star, as shown by the arrows on the board, and rotates the board once. If any player forgets to do this and another player mentions it, the player who forgot loses an X-Wing fighter from his squadron. Other players follow in turn and play moves clockwise. And gets a 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now he's going to rotate the board once so he doesn't forget, so he doesn't get called out on it. He is on a TIE fighter. Along the route to the Death Star orbit, there are TIE fighters on several spaces. There's 11 in total, and there's 2 on the outside. If you land on a TIE fighter, you must have a dogfight. To do this, use the outer ring of the spinner. If the arrow lands on you, shoot down the TIE fighter, you win. Take a free spin. So he fights and defeats the TIE fighter. You shoot down a TIE fighter. You don't rotate the board, but you do get a free spin. He gets a 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Force is with you. Move ahead 3 spaces. So it's 1, 2, 3, and he slides into the Death Star orbit. Players move along the outer route until they enter the Death Star orbit. Enter the Death Star orbit by landing on an entered Death Star orbit space, or by reaching the end of the outer orbit. Once in orbit, players continue to circle Death Star in a clockwise direction. Now it's Red Squadron's turn. A 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Meteor shower moved back 2 spaces. But he's safe and he rotates the board 1 space. Blue Squadron's turn, gets a 6. He doesn't rotate the board yet. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's into the Death Star orbit. rotates the board once, he just misses 2 TIE fighters. Red gets 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Droid malfunction, return to Rebel base. And he rotates the board. Blue spins, gets a 3. 1, 2, 3. What does that say? Engine malfunction, move back 2 spaces, so that is there. And when he rotates the board, guess what? The TIE fighter. So he will fight the TIE fighter. And he loses. Shoots down one of the X-Wings. If the arrow lands on TIE fighter shot down one of your X-Wing fighters, you lose. Actually, that's a typo. It should say shoots down. You can either remove one X-Wing from your squadron or return to the Rebel base. We'll take the easiest one to get off and set it aside. Red squadron spins, a 6. As long as it goes around once, you're fine, just like the Price is Right. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and he slides into Death Star orbit and rotates Death Star once. This is kind of hard to do with the camera. But we get a 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Rotate, and we're safe. 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rotate. 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Hyperspace drive, move to Death Star entry. So we go immediately since it's unoccupied, and our next turn starts there. But we rotate the board, and everyone's safe. 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Rotate the board. It does not affect anybody. Blue Squadron begins his Death Star trench run with a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you land on a TIE fighter in a trench, you must have a dogfight, as in rule number 5. So Blue Squadron needs to fight the TIE fighter in the trench. And he defeats the TIE fighter. So he gets a free spin. A 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It just impacted on the surface. If you do not land on the crosshairs by exact count, you leave the trench and return to Death Star orbit. Do not skip turns. 6, 7. And he rotates the game board. Now Red Squadron is sandwiched between 2 TIE fighters, but the one on the outer orbit doesn't mean anything. Let's look at the one on the inner orbit. Rule number 9 says, either before or after your rotation, during your turn. Now it was Blue's rotation and his turn. So according to the rules as they're written, Red Squadron does not fight the TIE fighter. However, I always house rule it to make it more fun and interesting. So we're going to have him fight that TIE fighter. And he shoots down a TIE fighter. So he gets a free spin. What's the ruling on the field? It is a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he lands next to another TIE fighter. So he'll fight him again. See, it's a little more exciting. And he gets shot down. So he loses one X-Wing, and you can take any of them off. We'll take the easiest one. And it is still his turn. He gets a 1. It's the end of his turn, so he rotates Death Star 1 space. And there are no TIE fighters. On the line, spin again. If the arrow lands on a line at this time or any other time, spin again. Just barely 6. So blue moves 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but he can't occupy the same space as another squadron, so he goes back 1. If you land on a space that is already occupied by an X-Wing squadron, take the first empty space behind it, unless it is a double space like the Enter Death Star orbit space. 2 squadrons may occupy these spaces. And he rotates the board. 5. So red moves 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and has to fight a TIE fighter. Shoot down TIE fighter. That was part of his turn, so he rotates Death Star. And now he'll spin again for defeating the TIE fighter. 3. Red squadron moves 1, 2, 3. That says destroy turbo laser, move ahead 1. Hyperspace, move to Death Star entry. It is unblocked, so he'll continue his next turn in the Death Star trench. 7. So blue squadron flies into this forces with you, move ahead 3 spaces. 1, 2, 3. Move to Death Star entry. However, it is occupied or blocked, as the rules state, by red squadron. Another special rule, number 12. If you land on the space that says go to Death Star entry, and the entry is occupied, which means blocked, you may wait on that space until the entry is clear. This is the only time you may skip a turn. So we'll tap him, and when red squadron leaves, he can occupy that space. We'll also rotate Death Star 1 space. 5. So red squadron moves down the Death Star trench. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. To the middle. Rotate Death Star 1 space. And it is blue's turn. So he can move into the Death Star trench. I'm going to pick him up like this. 5 spaces would be on the same space as red squadron, so he has to move back 1, and he has to fight a TIE fighter. That was his move, so he'll spin Death Star once. Just barely shot down by TIE fighter. So the TIE fighter defeated him, so he'll remove 1 X-Wing. And now it's red's turn. Red squadron moves ahead 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 off Death Star. Engine malfunction, move back 2 spaces. 1, 2. And oftentimes you get caught in a dogfight with a TIE fighter. So we'll resolve that before he rotates Death Star. Just barely shot down by TIE fighter. So he loses another X-Wing to a TIE fighter, and now he rotates Death Star. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and barely misses the exhaust port. Rotates the board. 8. Red squadron 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And another TIE fighter dogfight. Shoot down TIE fighter. He wins the dogfight and rotates Death Star 1 space. And he will spin again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and yet another TIE fighter. Shoot down TIE fighter. In the middle. Another TIE fighter defeated, so that must be Red 5 Luke Skywalker, but he moves ahead 2. Avoid collision with another X-Wing squadron and leave the inner Death Star orbit. So his turn ends there. 4. So Blue Squadron leaves the Death Star, and he moves 1, 2, 3, 4 spaces back into the inner orbit, rotates Death Star. 3. Luke Skywalker, 1, 2, 3. And of course the Force is with you, move ahead 3 spaces into the inner orbit. Rotate Death Star. And a 3 is going to get Blue Squadron nowhere. Turbo Laser, go back 3 spaces. Rotate Death Star. Now Red Squadron is next to enter. As the rules are written, rule number 13, a player who lands by exact count on the space next to the Death Star entryway may begin the attempt to destroy Death Star. Now I'm going to house rule this and say that he didn't land next to it, but the entryway landed next to him when it rotated. And it makes sense to start his next turn in the Death Star trench. And then starting his turn with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And he rotates Death Star. Another 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rotate Death Star, and Darth Vader appears. And there is no Millennium Falcon, so he must return with 1 X-Wing back to the Rebel base, and he does not gain any X-Wings. Because as Darth Vader points to his own rule, number 10, if you are next to Darth Vader and the Millennium Falcon is not present, see rule number 11, you must return to the Rebel base, even if it isn't your turn. You do not lose nor gain any X-Wing fighters in your squadron. So this is interesting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spaces gets him back to hyperspace drive, and he goes all the way back to enter the Death Star trench again. And he'll rotate Death Star. So Blue Squadron takes off with 1 X-Wing. Seven. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And he battles a TIE fighter in the outer orbit. Shot down by TIE fighter. If you lose all 3 X-Wings, you must return to the Rebel base. So he lost, but first he will rotate Death Star. He would lose that X-Wing, so he has to go back to the Rebel base because he wouldn't have any X-Wings in his squadron. But he gets to replace all his X-Wings in the squadron and start again. And that's on his next turn. And fresh R2 units. 4. So Luke Skywalker moves 1, 2, 3, 4 into another TIE fighter dogfight, where he will prove his superior skills. Shoot down TIE fighter. After yet another win, he'll rotate Death Star and spin again. 4. Another 4 gets him 1, 2, 3, 4. 1 shy of the exhaust port. Blue Squadron with the fresh squadron takes off and lands in enter Death Star orbit. Rotates Death Star and is safe for now. Luke can hit Womp Rats, but not the exhaust port yet. So he moves off of Death Star, rotates the board once. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Destroy Turbo Laser, move ahead 2. 1, 2. and rotate the board. And Luke Skywalker, with the luck he has, is next to Darth Vader. However, Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon are present, so that cancels that Darth Vader out. Just like the movie. The Millennium Falcon of Han Solo appears and disappears around the edge of Death Star. When it is visible, all players in the inner orbit are safe from TIE fighters and Darth Vader. You do not have to return to the Rebel base if you land next to Darth Vader. So Luke will move 1, 2, 3, 4. Rotate Death Star. That is a 2. 1, 2, uneventful. He will rotate the board. 1, 2, 3, 4, and he would be on 5, but he has to move back 1, and it happens to be hyperspace drive. So he enters the trench once again. When I went back to watch this, I realized that I accidentally moved the board backwards while I was moving the red squadron. So for demonstration purposes, we're going to pick it up from here because I shot a lot of footage to finish the game and it turned out pretty interesting. He will rotate Death Star. 1, 2, 3. This is interesting. Even though Han Solo's there, Turbo Laser moved back 2. Not much help there. He's next to a TIE fighter, but it's in the outer orbit, so he does not have to dogfight it. But he will rotate the board. Luke gets a 1, 2, 3 and rotates the board. There's a TIE fighter battle, according to our house rules. And he defeats the TIE fighter. 3 X-Wings sandwiched between 2 TIE fighters. He defeats the inner orbit TIE fighter. 1, 2, 3, 4. And has to fight another TIE fighter. He doesn't rotate Death Star yet because he has to resolve this dogfight. Shot down by TIE fighter. He will lose the X-Wing closest to the TIE fighter this time. Now he rotates Death Star. Luke is overly aggressive with a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And he rotates Death Star. Blue Squadron gets a 1, 2, 3, 4. Move back 2 spaces. And you hit this often. Another dogfight before he rotates Death Star. Shoot down TIE fighter. He wins the dogfight. Rotates Death Star and spins again. They're all over the place, man. 1, 2, 3, 4. Move back 1 into yet another dogfight. Shoot down TIE fighter. On the line. On the line again. 1. This doesn't happen often. He defeated the TIE fighter, got the free spin, moves ahead 1, but has to move back 1, and another TIE fighter appears because he does not rotate Death Star. Defeats the TIE fighter. The forces with Blue Squadron. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They're very generous in here. Move ahead 3 spaces or move ahead 1 space and get to the Death Star entry. So a long eventful turn for Blue Squadron. 1, 2, 3, 4. Rotate Death Star. And Blue Squadron begins his Death Star trench run. A 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Rotate Death Star. It's Luke Skywalker's turn. 1, 2, 3. And rotate Death Star. In the middle. A 7, they overshot it by a long shot. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But they maintain orbit. And rotate Death Star. And it is barely a 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Move back 2. 1, 2. So Luke will end up there. And rotate Death Star. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Force is with you. 1, 2, 3. And enter. Death Star trench again. Rotate Death Star. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. He will dogfight the TIE Fighter before he rotates Death Star. Shot down by TIE Fighter. Maybe that wasn't Luke Skywalker after all, because he lost and he has to return to the Rebel base. But regains a fresh squadron. He hung on a long time with one X-Wing though. He rotates the board. Blue Squadron begins yet another trench run. Blue Squadron begins another trench run with a 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And rotates Death Star. 3. 1, 2, 3. Rotate Death Star. Another 3. 1, 2, 3. He destroys Death Star. 1, 2, 3. Because rule number 14, if you land on the crosshairs by exact count, you have destroyed Death Star and won the game. So you can see it can take a while, but you can in fact land by exact count on the Death Star exhaust port and destroy Death Star. I have a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and some Star Wars minis games that use special dice that a lot of gamers are familiar with. I'll upload a video showing my custom house rules using all of those dice with this Destroy Death Star game. That video and other games will be in the Collectible Games playlist link at the end. Other classic games I have to show are Kenner's Escape from Death Star, Hoth Ice Planet Adventure, and Milton Bradley's Epic Duels. It's a miniature battle game played with cards and dice. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I had lots of fun doing it. Destroying Death Star. Check out these other links and please subscribe for more. And when you do that, select the gear icon on the home page and click Send Me Updates. And may the Force be with you.